black police chief, becomes the first black police chief, but then leaves as the black police chief because of racism, of reform. Put it up for my ass. Okay, here we go. So according to the allegation that he has made, this black police chief was the first in Vallejo Police Department. November 2019 is when he was hired. This was in California. Going to Atlanta Black Star, Mr. Shawny Williams became the first black police chief of the city only months after local media revealed the agency to have one of the highest rates of police shootings in California, disproportionately targeting black men. After initiating reforms within his department, Vallejo police officers turned on him, with officers sending him threatening letters, as well as making verbal threats, forcing the chief to step down in November 2022, after only 3 years at the helm, according to a lawsuit filed against the department last week. Now we have the information. So in a telephone interview with the Atlanta Black Star, they did a great job on this. Civil rights attorney Melissa Node said she has filed at least 10 lawsuits against the Vallejo Police Department over the past few years, and said the corruption within the department is astronomical compared to other law enforcement agencies. Quote, I refer to Vallejo as Vallejo, Mississippi, because we have had some of the most egregious behavior from employees that the department, that year after year haven't been held accountable. She said, adding that the department was made up of about 70% white police officers before the arrival of the new chief. The attorney said she was also the target of death threats by those same police officers who would call her home and follow her as she was driving and take photos and videos of her as she went about her business. But that came to an end when Williams took over as chief. She filed internal affairs complaints against the officers, harassing and threatening her. Quote, I never received another death threat after that, Node said. So let's understand what's happening so far in the narrative. You have a police chief who is literally tapped, recruited, hired for the sake of reform. He happens to be the first black police chief of that city. He engages in implementing reforms that seemingly stops illegal behavior of the police department, noted by not only the stats, but also an attorney who received threats according to her. Those threats stopped once new leadership was installed, which says it's not about the rules, it's more so about the enforcement. It's not about the, let's say, letter of the law. It's about the culture in which permeates beyond it. There's more. So prior to Williams' arrival, the Vallejo Police Department, the officers had a celebratory ritual where they would bend the tips of their badges after shooting and killing someone in the line of duty. A practice that had lasted for decades before Captain John Whitney blew the whistle and ended up fired in August 2019 in retaliation before receiving a damn near $1 million settlement in 2023. Williams put a stop to that practice when he took over in November 2019. All of these seem quite commonsensical, right? If you are harassing a citizen, verbal threats, phone call threats, well, that's criminal behavior. If you're engaged in this kind of activity, that means that you are acting well outside of the color of law, well outside of your jurisdictional authority, and well outside of being a sworn peace officer. You're engaged in criminal action. Beyond that, the reason why these things stopped, once again, because there's a new chief. in town. But as they did with a prior leader among them that attempted to do right, they did with this one. So Williams wasted no time in implementing reforms, banning chokeholds, making body cameras mandatory, and instituting new de-escalation policies, as well as hiring more Black officers in a San Francisco Bay Area department that had been historically white, patrolling a diverse city of 126,000, where 19% of residents are Black. That's according to the U.S. Census. Quote, as Chief Williams began implementing reform within the police department, he faced tremendous backlash from the department command staff and some of the patrol officers, not only due to his reform efforts and holding officers accountable, but because he was African American in a police department and city with a long history of deeply ingrained overt racism, states the lawsuit filed by civil rights attorney Melissa Node March 19th in federal court. I want you to understand how ironic it is. They're saying this happened from his command staff and some patrol officers, which means those who were accountable to him in leadership, the individuals who served as supervisors for the other officers, those are the ones that gave him challenge to the reform. Not simply the street cop, but we're talking about the seasoned professional. We're talking about the individuals who have been on the beat for 10, 20, maybe 30 years or more. There's more. Chief Williams was subjected to racial animus from command staff members the moment he stepped through the door, being referred to as Black Jesus and racially mocked in various ways, the complaint said. Much of the harassment against him was enabled by the local police union, whose members overwhelmingly voted they had no confidence in their new Black reform-setting police chief, calling news conferences to complain about him, telling journalists, he's like the king. He's not the chief. But see, I thought y'all liked kings. I thought y'all liked dictators and such. I thought y'all liked strong men. A man's man. Not if he happens to be Black and righteous when it comes to his profession and industry. Not when that man decides to disrupt a culture of corruption. All of a sudden, there's no blue line. What happened to it? I thought you all had a cohesive culture. There's more. Chief Shawny Williams resigned out of fear for what? Once again, safety. Safety of his family as the result of receiving threats, and the city of Vallejo intentionally concealed this information from the public. POST, which is the California Commission on Peace Officer Standard and Training, every state has it basically, and the California Department of Justice, the lawsuit states Williams, who spent 26 years working for the San Jose Police Department before arriving in the new city, was paid $408,000 by the city, equivalent to 18 months of salary, which required him to sign a 2-year non-disclosure form. Williams' departure was marked by a sharp increase in violence among those same city cops, a return to the violent days before he became chief, when the department was making national headlines for shooting and killing a Black man named Willie McCoy 55 times within 3 seconds after finding him asleep in his car with a gun on his lap, as well as assaulting a Black filmmaker named Adrian Burrow after he attempted to record a cop pulling a gun on his cousin. Since the chief's departure, A white cop was caught on video punching a black woman in the face who had been involved in a car accident, while others raided the home of a black family over a cop's pair of gold-plated handcuffs. We reported on that at Indisputable, that she was not even allowed to have. The department was also exposed by the Vallejo Sun in 2023 for destroying evidence pertaining to police shootings. Quote, Vallejo police officers used force during arrests more than 5 times as much in 2023 as they had at this point last year, using force 198 times through September 2023 compared to only 38 times by that point in 2022, according to data released by Vallejo Police last week, according to the Vallejo Sun. Quote, the increase in force incidents this year follows a steady decline under former Vallejo Police Chief Shawny Williams, who suddenly resigned in November under pressure from the union, the Officers Association for the city. The Sun added, put up the current chief. The current chief is Jason Ta. The current chief is listed in a lawsuit as a defendant, along with other cops in that jurisdiction, accusing them of violating a couple's First and Fourth Amendment rights, as well as battery, false imprisonment during a 2023 incident. It also accuses the police department's leadership of negligence by inadequately training officers, giving them free rein to violate and abuse the rights of citizens. This operates like a well-tuned gang. There's an individual not down with the cultural corruption, the program that has been in play. All of a sudden, there's this about face. There's a turning away from the leadership. But it is interesting. You see, the government workers, cops are government employees. They work based on the common good of the local taxpayer. At least that's what it's supposed to be. There is no other agency within local government that could ever get away with being this adversarial to basic reform and their current leadership, except for the police. This has to make other departments upset. This has to make the general taxpayer who cares about funding the police mad. All right, Jackson, hell of a story, a lot of twists and turns. Thoughts here?
Yeah, well, this really goes to show and we see this all the time, that you can be in position but not be empowered. Just because you hold a seat doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right to dictate things, or that whatever that board body is going to follow what you want in general. Because clearly the idea here was assimilation and not real reform, because you start shaking up the status quo, then people can feel it. People notice that. You throw a couple of people away here and there, but if you actually try to change things, that's something different. Because, at the end of the day, police officers, at least as a whole, may not necessarily make a lot of money, but they have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence. They have the ability to, tell people what to do. That's a lot of power. Like, go here, move here, do this, don't do that. And that's something that they've been fighting to protect for a long time. But I mean, clearly they didn't have any intentions for there to be real reform. I don't know why they put him in this position in the first place. If they was just gonna kick him out that quickly, y'all, he Black Jesus because he trying to do his job. But yeah, I guess they put him there and they were like, oh no, what the hell were we thinking? Clearly that's what they did, but might as well not even put him there.
Yeah, I think sometimes they hope the person is not a true believer.
Yeah.
They hope the person is playing the same game they're playing, and then when they find out he's a real one, all of a sudden everything turns against them. We're going to bring you updates on this story as it develops.